Welcome back to Crafting While Adulting. It's been a long time, so I wanted to take you on a journey with me. I made this mixed media art piece that we're working on. This is a cardstock stencil created by using our vinyl cutters. I used modeling paste with an opaque matte finish by Finnabair and Prima Marketing in their Art Basics line. I used a palette knife to spread the opaque matte modeling paste across my stencil, and I would turn my stencil to add a little bit of different positioning. I filled up my wood plaque that I bought from Hobby Lobby, but you could use any thick paper or canvas or canvas panel. I just happen to have this wood plaque on hand, and I decided to use it. I did not fill up the entire space with the stencil. I wanted to leave some openings to add some more texture using a textured paste. First, I used a textured paste also by Finnabair called Textured Sand, but it didn't really provide enough texture for me, for my taste, so I went and grabbed cement texture by, I believe it was Folk Art, and added that into the open spaces. I do really like the Finnabair line of mixed media textured pastes and paints. They're pretty versatile. You can use them for a lot of different projects. So here you see me putting on the cement texture to really amp up the texture of the wood. I kind of just stipple it on there instead of using like a brushing method. Then I went and dried that and let that dry, and then I used heavy gesso, also by Finnabair. It's in the color black. I love this gesso. It's very thick. It goes on thick. And I don't use a lot. A little bit goes a long way. I can always water it down, and it does really well at covering things and giving me a new background to work on. It will soak up, or not soak up, but give me a chance to add more color on top of it. I used the black in this particular project because I wanted a darker kind of undertone versus the white. They do have white that I also recommend. It also dries with a very nice matte finish. It's basically a good primer for any type of project, really. They have a clear version as well in terms of gesso if you don't want white or black. I started adding different embellishments with my soft gloss gel, also by Finnabair. It dries transparent, even though it goes on white. And the whole thing about mixed media, in terms of this type of mixed media, is good composition. It took me years to figure this out. I've wasted so many embellishments trying to figure out the best way to do composition when it comes to found object type art when it comes to mixed media. So I have a ton of metal embellishments that I got from various different locations, craft stores, a lot of jewelry. You can use pretty much anything you want. I got a lot of these from Amazon because I also make jewelry, and I found that I could use them for this as well. So I will drop the link in the tutorial on the actual written tutorial for the blog post that I will be doing for this video. So definitely look out for that. I basically just brushed on the soft gloss gel. It doesn't dry super quick, so you have a lot of time to work if you want to move something around if you don't like where it's at. And like I said, it does dry clear, but it does have a gloss finish, which didn't really matter for this particular project because I was going to be adding black gesso over top of the metal pieces that I added so that I could add the colored paste later on. So I kind of did from one corner to the other with this particular piece. I added gears to just different metal pieces that I personally liked and just kind of laid them on there. You definitely want to start out with your larger pieces first on the bottom layer because this type of mixed media is all about layers, obviously, and you kind of want to have an idea going in what main things you want to use. I kind of messed up and did not plan out the best when it comes to knowing what my focal point was going to be. So I definitely recommend planning that out in advance. That way you're not covering important little metal embellishments with your main focal point like I end up doing later on in the video. I have a bunch of these little metal clocks that I absolutely adore, and I wanted to find one that I could use, so I brought those out. And basically you just keep adding until you're satisfied. And once you're satisfied, you let that dry. Sometimes it's hard to know when to stop. That is always my biggest issue with mixed media in this type of format, I guess. Figuring out my composition. Here's an up-close view. And then I covered all my pieces once again with the black gesso, so that basically my colored textured paste that are coming up next you'll be able to see them over the metal. Plus it helps when you have a bunch of different colors of metal objects and you don't want it to look like a hot mess. definitely want to make sure your edges are covered. I also put texture on the edges of my piece so that it's kind of cohesive. So these are the two new texture paste sets I got in, the Camouflage set and the Anemone and Coral set. Both are by Finnabair from Prima Marketing. I absolutely adore these types of pastes. Not only do they add texture, but when you dry brush them onto found objects, they really put just the right amount of color. So I would kind of load up my brush, and I would definitely at first put too much on there. So I was like, oh, well, we're going to use the dry brush technique. So I started out with the darkest color, which was the dark olive, and very lightly brushed over all of my areas. I love how the metal objects pick up just the right amount of color, especially when you dry brush. You just load up your brush and then wipe most of it off. It sounds kind of counterintuitive and wasteful, but I always go back to my napkin to get more paint before I go back to the actual lid or jar, whatever I'm using. I decided to bring you in a little bit closer so you can actually see the texture and color being added. Like I said earlier, always want to make sure that you're adding to the sides as well when it comes to mixed media, if you have sides, because you want it to be a cohesive piece. Next up, I believe I used the brown that comes in the Camouflage set. These sets are pretty cheap, I would say, considering most mixed media stuff is super expensive. This set is very cheap. I usually try to go from darkest to lightest unless I want to add a little bit of dark into a piece, which I believe I end up doing later on. Basically, I'm just dry brushing and stippling all over everything. I love how the texture paste not only shows up with the found objects or metal embellishments, but they also bring out the texture in the stencil with the modeling paste as well. I feel like it really adds something and adds some dimension to the entire piece. Next up, I used a little bit of taupe rose from the anemone and coral set. Now the other ones, the camouflage set, is technically a rust effect texture paste, and then the anemone and coral comes from their fantasy line of texture paste. It's pretty much the same. I don't see too much of a difference besides the colors. I really love this rose color. It's super pretty. Then I went in with a little bit of this orangey color, also part of the anemone and coral set. It added nice bright pop, which I liked. And I finished up with Dusty on this particular round of texture paste. Like I said earlier, you want to make sure that you are working from darkest to lightest for the most part. I'm really satisfied with how it's looking so far. I went ahead and added a little bit of the Finnabair mica powder. This is the gold color. I'm trying to get my camera to focus. They come in a set, and I have quite a few of them. I originally just tried to do it dry brushing on it, but then I added some matte Mod Podge to my palette and kind of mixed in a little bit of the mica powder. And kind of just stippled it into different locations that I thought needed a little bit of extra shine. I went back and added a little bit of green, the dark olive color, to a couple locations that I felt were kind of lost. It was lost and you couldn't see it anymore due to all the layers, which is okay. You can do that sometimes. And I also added way too much mica powder in certain areas as well. So I wanted to go back and kind of mask that. Once again, just dry brushing and stippling it in different locations. And I went back in and added a little bit of, I believe, the black gesso in some areas because I felt like it needed to be toned down as far as the bright color. I kind of wanted most of the focus to be towards the middle, and toning out or toning down the outside part really helps kind of put the focus towards the embellishments while still having the complement of the texture around the outside. So I found these little old photos from Tim Holtz. They're done by Tim Holtz. And I found one that I liked, and I kind of tucked it in there. I ended up turning it to landscape style, and I added a few extra embellishments around the photograph because I felt like it was missing something. So here's where I am just tarnishing or adding the texture paste to the added embellishments that I just put on there around the photograph. So I'm going back in with the olive and the gesso and everything else to kind of make it cohesive and make it so that it's not sticking out. She pretty much became my focal point of the entire piece, and I love the vintage look of the photographs. Here are little mica flakes, also by Finnabair from the set. I tried hot gluing them and I decided that didn't work, so I just kind of mixed some matte Mod Podge on my palette and took my brush and kind of just dipped them in the flakes and then dipped them into the Mod Podge and just touched them to the artwork wherever I felt like they should go. And it just adds a little something, a little bit of sparkle, in my opinion. It also adds a little bit of texture as well. I plugged in my hot glue gun earlier and decided that I wanted to add some paper flowers. These are different color roses, different size roses as well, and I kind of just wanted to add them around the photo. Some of these flowers are from Prima Marketing, and some of them are just random flowers that I got either from Hobby Lobby or Joann's or Michael's, and I just glued those on. I will say don't use hot glue to put your embellishments on, because if you're like me and are impatient and you use a heat gun to dry your piece, it will ruin it. Here's the finished product, and I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to give a thumbs up if you liked it and subscribe. Until next time.